In September of 2025, the nation of Nepal just broke. An entire political system, a whole government, seemed to evaporate in just a couple of days. It was a political earthquake, and it leaves us with one heck of a question.
I mean, seriously, how does that even happen? This isn't something you see every day. This wasn't a slow decay, a gradual decline. It was a sudden, violent, and total system failure. And in this explainer, we're going to get into exactly how a country can hit its tipping point.
Okay, so first things first, let's be really clear about what this was. This wasn't your classic military coup with generals taking over the TV station. No, this was a revolutionary rupture. This was a popular uprising that just completely delegitimized the state and tore it down with unbelievable speed.
I mean, the speed of this collapse is just breathtaking. Look at this timeline. On September 4th, the government makes this boneheaded move to ban social media. By the 8th, you've got massive, peaceful protests. And just one day later, the prime minister is gone, the capital's on fire, and the army's in the streets. The whole thing went from protest to insurrection in less than 48 hours.
In any revolution, there's always a moment where the line is crossed, and there's no going back. In Nepal, it was this. The second that security forces fired live rounds into a crowd of what were mostly teenagers protesting peacefully. After that, any hope for a peaceful off-ramp, for some kind of negotiation, was completely gone.
19. That was the number that came out. 19 confirmed dead. 19 young people. This single number turned all that public anger into an absolute fury. It was a fatal miscalculation by the government. They didn't just create martyrs, they poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning out of control.
So we've seen the what? The incredible collapse. But now for the real question, why? What was the fuel for this inferno? Well, it all boils down to a generation that had been completely written off, a generation that felt like it had absolutely no future.
Just try to wrap your head around this number. Over 2,000 young Nepalis were leaving the country every single day. And they weren't leaving for exciting opportunities or to study abroad. They were leaving to find basic, often grueling, low-skilled work. It was a mass exodus born of pure, crushing hopelessness.
And at the same time, this desperation was being thrown in their faces online. While the average young person was struggling, a viral trend called Nepo Kids was all over social media, showing the ultra-rich lifestyles of the politicians' children. Luxury cars, designer clothes, parties. It became this infuriating symbol of a system that felt completely rigged against them.
And here is the craziest paradox of all. The entire country's economy was basically being held up by the very kids it was failing. The money they sent home from abroad, remittances, made up a quarter of the entire GDP. The state was literally surviving on the backs of the generation it had forced out.
So, with all this tension simmering, the government's next move was the spark. They banned the platforms where people were organizing and voicing dissent. But they left one app untouched: TikTok, the same China-based platform where the Nepo kids were flaunting their wealth. For young people, this was just the ultimate insult. It felt like proof the government was protecting its own while silencing everybody else.
A firestorm like this doesn't just appear out of thin air. This explosion of rage was a long time coming. It was the result of deep, structural problems that had been rotting the foundation of Nepal's republic for years.
The whole system was basically built to fail. First, after a brutal civil war, nobody was ever held accountable. Second, they rushed through a new constitution that left huge groups of people feeling excluded. Third, you had this endless game of political musical chairs, so nothing ever got done. And finally, the whole state was captured by a small club of aging politicians who just recycled power among themselves. It was a house of cards.
And this right here, this is the core of the problem. It's what some call the Republic's original sin. After the war, the guys in charge basically made a deal. I won't prosecute your side if you don't prosecute mine. As this analyst put it, it was a tacit pact of mutual impunity. This created a political culture where leaders felt they were totally above the law, and that poison seeped into everything.
So the government's gone, the capital's in chaos, you've got this massive power vacuum, and whatever institution steps into that void is going to shape the entire future of the country.
And make no mistake, the public's rage was for the whole lot of them. It wasn't just about Prime Minister Ali. It was about his partners, his rivals, even former rebel leaders who were now part of the system. The people wanted a clean sweep. They wanted all of them gone.
Their demand was simple and it was absolute. No more politicians from the old guard. They actually put forward their own candidate, a former Chief Justice named Sushila Karki, someone known for her integrity. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a demand for a total system reboot.
Now, when the military gets involved, even as a mediator, it introduces this really dangerous idea called Praetorianism. It's basically when the armed forces become the ultimate referee in politics. And for any democracy, that's a huge risk. It's a line that once you cross it is very, very hard to uncross.
To be fair, all signs point to the fact that the army didn't want to take over. It was more of a reluctant coup, as this quote says. They stepped in to stop the country from sliding into total anarchy. But, and this is a big but, by forcing the politicians' hands, they set a really powerful and risky precedent for the future.
The revolution absolutely succeeded in tearing the old house down. But now comes the hard part. What do you build in its place? Nepal is now at a massive crossroads, with some very different futures ahead of it.
Okay, so the new interim government has this monumental task ahead. They have to somehow meet the sky-high expectations of the people. They've got to fight off the old political parties who you can bet are just waiting for their chance to come back. And crucially, they have to get the army back in its barracks and make it clear that civilians are in charge.
So when you boil it all down, you're looking at about 3 possible outcomes. Scenario A, the best case. Real democratic renewal. A new generation takes over. Scenario B, the depressing one, the old guard finds a way back, and it's back to business as usual. And then there's Scenario C, the dangerous one, an authoritarian drift, where the military starts pulling more and more of the strings.
Which brings us to the final, critical question. The rage of a generation was powerful enough to demolish a corrupt system. But those underlying problems, the weak institutions, the culture of impunity, they're all still there. Can you really build something new and stable on that same flawed foundation? That's the question that will define Nepal's future.